Hello, this is Faith at Faith and Books. How are you doing? I want to review a book that I finished a few days ago by Ivan Doig, This House of Sky, Landscapes of a Western Mind. And I actually made a video on Tuesday, and I made it in iMovies because I wanted to attach photos from our trip to Montana. And somehow I messed it up, and in trying to fix it, I somehow deleted it. So I'm doing this again, but I must say the wind is sort of taken out of my sails. So I'm trying to regroup and get my mind back in focus on this book because I've kind of moved on since then. Anyway, I really liked this book so much, and it just came at the most fortunate time for me. I discovered it on our way back from Montana. So we went on this trip. So my husband and my 7-year-old grandson and I flew to Chicago from DC, and then we spent an afternoon in Chicago, and then we got on a train and took a train, the Empire Builder, across several states to Montana, to Glacier National Park, where we met with a group called Classic Journeys, and we spent 5 days exploring Glacier National Park, and then we flew home. So it was a very fun vacation. I really enjoyed it. I had never really traveled with a group before. I think I did one time before. Yeah, long time ago. But I haven't done that in more than 30 years, 40 years. And I really enjoyed it because you didn't have to worry about driving anywhere. You didn't have to worry about getting permits or, access to places. Didn't have to worry about food. So for me, it was very relaxing in that way. Also, I loved the guides. The guides were great. They were full of information. It was very accommodating. It was a wonderful experience. And I loved Montana. I just thought it was gorgeous scenery. Just everywhere you looked, there was just this beautiful, beautiful mountains to look at, and waterfalls and rivers, these crystal clear streams, and it was just lovely. And the flora was very different from here in Virginia, in the Piedmont area here. So anyway, so I want to review this book, and then I'll talk just a little bit about, I can't tell you all about my trip, and that would be boring, but there were so many things in this book that reminded me of the vacation that I had just experienced. So I wanted to talk about it. So what this House of Sky is a memoir of Ivan Doig growing up in Montana in the 1940s and 50s. And it's really about his father and then his grandmother who helped raise him. And this isn't a spoiler because you find out right at the beginning of the book, his mother passes away when he's 6. And so he really bonds with his father. They're very hard scrabble ranch hands. That's what his father does. And some cattle, but mostly sheep. And they have a really hard life. They're out there dealing with the elements, and it was a very hard life. Very rough and tough kind of, life. And so it was really fascinating. It reminded me of Little Britches, the Little Britches series by Ralph Moody. I read that, it's a series. I read those a few years ago. They are more middle grade, though. This is an adult novel. There's some cussing that goes on in some adult situations. The cussing is just there. I mean, it's not horrible cussing, but it's just how the cowboys and the ranch hands talk. So, he's being realistic. Now I'm losing my train of thought. What was I going to say? Oh my goodness. Wait a second. I gotta get this back because I don't want to make another video. Anyway, he's recalling his life, and a lot of what he was talking about reminded me of our vacation. So it starts, I was saying it was similar to Little Britches. Yeah. Because it's about, a boy growing up and working on ranches and that sort of thing, out in the West, many, many years ago. So the the thing that I want to talk about, though, the thing that first grabbed me was just the description of the landscape, because when you're on the train going into Montana, you just spend hours. It's a 30-hour train ride, and you spend hours just going through this, to me, desolate looking landscape. It's either flat or it's very low rolling hills. The grass is brown as far as you can see, and it's just desolate. It's just huge, and it's empty. Every once in a while you'll see, a farm or a house or some sort of outbuilding, but it's really, it's not like here where I live, which is overly developed, So when he's describing that landscape, I could picture it. I could really picture what he was saying. But his childhood started out south of Glacier National Park. It was mostly in the White Sulphur Springs area and then Ringling. But towards the end of the book, or not towards the end, maybe halfway, they moved to the north. And they moved north of those to Browning, which is where we stayed. We stayed for 2 nights on the Blackfeet Native American reservation. And we stayed at it was adjacent to a casino. And it was kind of like the level of a Best Western or something like that. It was not the fanciest, nicest accommodation. And I think my husband was a little put off by that. But I thought it was really interesting for the cultural aspect, because we were staying on the Indian reservation itself. And the casino is used to get money for projects on the reservation. Like they build a community center, and they're trying to get enough money to have Wi-Fi. So I found it interesting in that aspect. Plus, it was just neat to be driving around the reservation. There were things to notice, and it was educational. And we got to meet a Blackfoot Native American named Jack Gladstone, and he is a singer-songwriter. We bought a CD. He was wonderful. He told great stories. He sang really good, well-written songs, well presented. And then we got to eat dinner with him that night. So that was really interesting. And his niece is Lily Gladstone, who is a movie star. And she is actually starring, he talked about this, she's actually starring in a movie that's coming out, I think he said October 6th. And I forget the name of it, The Killer of the Something Moon. And it's directed by Martin Scorsese, and it's about the Osage Indians in the 1920s when they discovered oil on their reservation and what happened. And it's actually about the beginning of the FBI. So I don't know anything about the history of the FBI, or I should, because I've been to the FBI museum actually, but I don't remember any of this. So I'm looking forward to going to see that movie, and I feel like, wow, I know. When I see her on screen, I'll know that I've met her uncle. So we stayed on the Indian reservation, and then we spent 2 nights on in this really quaint hotel that used to be the rail workers' boarding house. And so that was, I'll attach a picture of one of the rooms. That was really quaint. It was built in 1910 or something like that. And that was really interesting. It was supposed to be haunted. Didn't see any ghosts. It had a very excellent restaurant attached to it. So that was really interesting too. But let me see, I'm kind of losing track of what I'm saying. Oh yeah, so when he talks about Browning, he talks about that they leased land to pasture their sheep in the summer from the reservation. So he's talking about places where I'd actually been. He's describing scenery that I'd actually seen. He also talks, there's this one scene where he and his father, they're like, oh, this is such a bleak place. And then they go over like a small hill or something, and they see the Rockies suddenly coming out of the mountains just jut up all of a sudden. And so that description was really, that's exactly how it seemed. We were on this train for hours and hours with this flat, open country, and I kept waiting for the Rockies. Every once in a while, there'd be a rocky outcropping you could see from the train. But then all of a sudden, towards the night, all of a sudden you could see these mountains. It was just glorious, just really majestic. And he talks about the weather, how strange the weather is there. It's just true, because you have this wet air coming in from the Pacific, and it hits the west side of the Rockies, and then this drier air that I think comes down from Canada, because you're pretty close to Canada at that point. And so the flora, yeah, that's what I was saying, is really different on either side of this ridge, of this divide. And when the fronts hit each other, it makes the strangest weather. So it can be hot, it can be cold, it can snow. I mean, it's crazy. The weather is really crazy there. We talked about that. Oh, he talks about the Hutterites. So I did not know about Hutterites. I think maybe I had heard the term, but I had no idea who they were. When we were on the train, I thought they were Amish or Mennonites, because there were a lot on the train, traveling on the train with us. And then when we were actually in Glacier National Park, we saw a lot of Hutterites. And I didn't know who they were, but the guide, one of the guides explained. And so they look Amish, the men wear those beards with no mustache, and they dress like the Amish or Mennonites. But they don't reject technology, but they do live in community. And I think they have clear delineation between women's work and men's work. So the men work on the farm, and the women do the cooking and such, child rearing. And they all eat in community, like in a big cafeteria. And they don't reject technology, which is noted in this book, that they would come and help them with their tractors and stuff. And let's see what else. Oh, and so Ivan Doig loved reading, and he's living out in this countryside. He doesn't have much access to books. But at one point when he was a young teen, they were living near a family that had stacks of magazines, National Geographic's, Saturday Evening Post, Life magazine, and they also had a small collection of books. And the one series they had was Hornblower. So he mentions reading Hornblower as a teen. And I'm doing the Hornblower 2023 reading event. And so that tickled me too when he mentioned that. And then when he gets older, so he did very well in school, and he got a scholarship to Northwestern University in Chicago. So he would take the train from Montana to Chicago to go back and forth to college. And he talks about that ride, and that was exactly what we had just experienced. So the book really resonated with me. I really enjoyed reading it. I will say that one caveat is about 10% of the time, I found his writing style too flowery. It was too, it was sort of exaggerated and strained, and I felt like he was forcing it to try to be really poetic. And so occasionally that would annoy me, and especially the first couple of pages of the book, I wasn't quite sure that I liked it, but then that faded away, and I would say 90% of the time I really enjoyed the book. And so I'm looking forward to reading more by Ivan Doig. I think it will be. I'm looking forward to reading him on June on the Range. The book is sad. It's sad at the end, because he's basically tracing the lives of his father and his grandmother, and so so it was a very poignant ending, but I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed learning about that part of the country and revisiting it through his words, and learning about what it was like in the 40s and 50s, and then he started college, I think, in 1960. So it goes on, maybe through the 60s when he's older. Anyway, it was a good book, and I'm looking forward to reading something by him for June on the Range next year. I'm already planning. I know he wrote a trilogy about set in Montana, and then somebody in my last video recommended a book by him. And one of the commenters, the Whistling Dream or something like that. I can't quite remember the name, but anyway, I'm excited to read more Ivan Doig, and I'm glad that I discovered him when I discovered him. So I'm going to attach some photos. I don't want to bore you, but I'm just going to do a few, a couple of Chicago, because I'd never been to Chicago except in the airport. So it was so nice to walk around Chicago. We from Union Station, we walked all the way to Lake Michigan, and right there, it's like a yacht club. So it really didn't look like the ocean. We kept telling the 7-year-old, oh, it'll look like the ocean, and it didn't. It was a yacht club. But that was neat to see Lake Michigan. And then we ate for lunch, we ate at this old German restaurant that had been there since 1898. So that felt historical. So this is neat. Oh, and the other thing was, the picture I'll show is my grandson standing at the canal. You know, they have that canal that goes through Chicago. And if you ever watch the old Bob Newhart show, at the beginning, the opening credits, there's a shot of him walking across one of the bridges. And when I saw it, I recognized it from that. I was like, Bob Newhart. So that was neat about Chicago. Then we got on the train, and we went through Wisconsin. I have a shot of Milwaukee, which I did not expect to be so pretty. We just went by the river, where Milwaukee is on the river. And then I'll have a couple shots of crossing the Mississippi. I've only done that by plane. And so we crossed the Mississippi River. And then I might have a couple of shots of just what the landscape looked like. And then I'll just show a few shots of Glacier National Park and what we did in Glacier National Park. So I don't know how many photos it's going to be. Hopefully I'm going to be able to attach them, and, you know, it will work out this time. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking, and I will talk to you later. Happy reading, and I hope you have listened this far, and hopefully you'll enjoy some of these photos. None of them are great. I'm not a great photographer. So, all right, talk to you later. Bye. Good.